Hello, everybody. Welcome to the special business meeting for Tuesday, December 17th. Holland Squallen, Squamish Okmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and ceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish's website following the meeting. If you have any concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting. Can I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our first order of business is a staff report on the quarterly financials for Q3. And I will pass it over to staff to run us through the presentation.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Sousa, and I'm the Director of Financial Operations. To assist with addressing me, my pronouns are she and her. I am joined here today by the Special and Capital Project Budget Managers. The Budget Managers will be available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. The objective of the presentation today is to provide information to Council on the progress of the work plan approved during the financial planning process for the period of January 1st to September 30th, 2024. During the presentation, I'll walk through three core areas, which are special projects, capital projects, and operations. There are 85 special projects in the approved financial plan. At September 30th, 2024, 2 have not started, 41 are in progress, 33 have been cancelled or delayed, and 9 have been completed. There are 130 capital projects in the approved financial plan. At September 30th, 2024, 1 has not been started, 57 are in progress, 46 have been cancelled or delayed, and 26 have been completed. As previously noted, 33 special projects and 46 capital projects have been cancelled or delayed, which is due to a number of factors, including delays in receiving other levels of government permitting, cancellations of projects that are dependent on grant funding when the grant funding has not been awarded, projects that are dependent on developer timelines that have been delayed by the developer, consultant or contractors not being available within the projected timeline, cost escalations beyond the approved budget, and staffing resources being shifted to higher priority projects such as the Chigai rezoning. In prior years, operational revenues and expenditures were presented in the quarterly variance report to Council. Staff will continue to present operational expenditures, however, at this time is not in a position to present operational revenues. The limitation is due to the requirement that the district implement a new public sector accounting revenue standard for the 2024 year. Staff are in the process of implementing this standard and will present revenue results to Council at year-end. To note, although special projects were discussed previously, they form part of operations and therefore are included in the operating results. The annual operating expenditures budget for 2024 is $86.8 million. The expenditures incurred from January to September 2024 are $46.5 million, which is 54% of the annual budget. When compared to the 9-month budget, the expenditures are $18.6 million less than budget. The $18.6 million variance is due to a number of factors. However, 2 items make up the majority of the variance, which are 1, amortization that's recorded at year-end, totals $8.6 million, and special projects are $6.4 million less than budgeted. In conclusion, Financial Services has not identified any concerns or risk to the 2024 budget in reviewing revenues and expenditures. As well, projects that require budget to be carried forward to 2025 will be brought back to Council in early 2025 to request an amendment to the 2025 to 2029 financial plan. This concludes the presentation. I'll now turn it back to the Chair.
Thank you very much. Council, I'll just remind everybody for this conversation, we're trying to work towards a motion to receive the report, but this is our opportunity to explore the contents of it as well. So Any questions? Councillor Pettingill.
Are the delayed items delayed until, are any delayed until Q4, or is everything into a future year when it says delayed?
Through the chair, the delayed intent is that they're not delayed till the end of Q4. They're delayed into a future year. But just to note, for special projects, 2 of the delayed are multi-year projects that were meant to be in future years. And that's the same with capital projects, that 18 of the 44 are intended to be completed in a future year. It's budget that's being carried forward, or will be requested to be carried forward.
Okay, thank you. And then the canceled delayed number seemed a bit higher than I recall in previous years. And I'm just wondering if we have any sense this is an indication that we've maybe bit off a bit more than we can chew. And if we need to sort of scale back our work plan, our strategic plan. I'm not sure who that question is for. But.
Are you asking if the delays are driven by straight capacity challenges on our end versus other factors? Is that what you're trying to understand with that question?
I guess so, yeah. And I see not everything as that, but certainly some of them are. And so how much of this is just like we're doing too much too fast?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So every year we endeavor to reprioritize and prioritize our financial plan accordingly. There is a number of reasons why there's delays that are part of this, which Ms. Souza has just outlined. But certainly we are trying to improve our financial planning so that we have the adequate capacity and the prioritization that is so that we can complete the full project timeline as we can.
Ms. Glende?
Thank you. Through the mayor, I would, in addition, I'd like to say that, yes, I would say as this organization and this council generally, because we are progressive and a growing community, are still taking on too much and doing it too quickly. Right sizing that is not an exact science. So thank you, Ms. Boxrud, for your comments there. But there is definitely an element of, and it's not a bad thing necessarily, but we are ambitious. And so that's why it's never going to be 100%.
And on this point, sort of the next touch point for this is the carry forward time, which is essentially our Q4 variance, is effectively the same, if not the same document. And I wonder at that time if, is that the best place to have that discussion, whether some things do need to really understand the knock-on effect of carrying forward? Is that something that really gets best to be flushed out there as the understanding grows? Are there things to take off? I know that's the main focus of that time is to look at the financial impacts that carry forward, but given that represents a lot of work as well, is that part of the discussion, or meant to be part of the discussion at that time as well?
Thank you. Through the chair, through you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Every touch point that we have and every indicator is something that we can use as a feedback loop into our financial planning. If there's anything at the Q4 time period, that is right before the spring amendment as well, and that is a prime time where we can learn from the year-end results and readjust as necessary. But every quarter is a touch point to learn and improve our financial planning and prioritization.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pettingill?
I guess I was sort of wondering if when our next, I don't want to use the wrong term, but strategic plan review is, and if that is a time too when we might want to look at this and see how much are we biting off.
Ms. Glende?
Thank you, through the mayor. At this point, we are scheduling a review of the district's current strategic plan in February of 2025.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Firstly, a question perhaps for Mr. Veliniskas regarding the steep slopes development permit area. I'll just read the project description. It remains delayed to allow time for development of hillside road standards currently underway to inform the DPA policies. Mr. Veliniskas, I wonder whether you might be able to explain more fully the relationship between these two elements, I would have assumed that the DPA is more general in nature and would inform the Hillside Road standards, but perhaps you might be able to explain the picture between these two respective initiatives.
Thank you. Through the chair, they are interrelated. The DP Steep Slopes Development Permit Area is a hazardous terrain development permit area. They are interrelated. They could be done individually. You could separate the kind of design of roads and subdivisions from where identifying where the hazardous areas are for locating buildings. But staff are of the opinion that it's best to integrate development, looking at it holistically between streets, slopes, cut and fill sections, together with where are appropriate locations for buildings in slope terrain areas. So that is the reason why we've been holding off on initiating the DP area until those engineering standards are determined, because they are not easy to determine. It's a process that we have to go through with our engineering department and emergency response organizations in order to determine what is kind of the maximum grades that would be acceptable and something that the district can handle. So for that reason, we've been proposing to integrate the two essentially aspects of a development permit area.
Thank you. My next question is for the Department of Recreation and Culture, concerns the Brennan Park fields and the Brennan Park Master Plan. I'll just find my note here. Under event, tournament, camping, parking lot, and community storage, I do have the number if that's needed. It states here the project is deferred to 2027, budget for planning to be carried forward, project delayed due to higher strategic priorities within the Brennan Parks Fields and Lands Master Plan. I guess my first question is, what are those strategic priorities, if you might be able to remind us of that picture? But I also have a concern which you may be able to address, and that is that we have a longstanding leaseholder, namely Squamish Days Logger Sports Association, which is not able to invest in needed upgrades, nor can they raise funds, which they would otherwise be able to do, because of they don't have a lease renewal. And I wonder where that sits. In the previously, the real estate department, I believe, answered that there needs to be progress made in the Brennan Parks overall plan. Could you paint this picture of strategic priorities and where that lease renewal situation may stand?
Jay Dale, pronouns are he and him, Director of Recreation and Culture. Through the chair, I think I'll defer to my GM, Ms. Latimer, on the strategic priorities question.
Thank you. Through the mayor, Megan Latimer, General Manager of Community Services. My pronouns are she and her. In terms of the strategic priorities, it's really what's outlined in the Brennan Park Field Lands Master Plan. So right now we're focusing on the shorter term goals, the 0 to 5 years. So I don't have it to hand right now, so I can't read them out, but I would certainly encourage you to go back and review the 0 to 5 year short-term goals. In terms of the logger sports lease area, staff are aware of this and are working interdepartmentally to have conversations with loggers around this. So there is definitely good awareness of this and also willingness to move forward and find a solution.
Thank you. My third and final question is perhaps for Economic Development Department. The Tourism Master Plan, under the project description, cancelled due to shift in and reprioritization of work in department aligned with the strategic plan. My question is, as it was in the last financial plan, 5-year financial plan, what is the status of any carryover funds? I wonder if staff could elaborate on the status of that project with respect to the monies that were allocated to it previously. Is there carryover? What is the outlook for continuing or schedule for continuing with that initiative, a tourism master plan?
Ms. Fenge, I believe this might be a question you're best situated to answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, sure. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. In relation to the tourism master plan, yes, it is on hold and deferred until a couple of years' time. We don't have any carryover in the budget for it at the moment, and so we will be looking to scope that work as we go forward. At the moment, a lot of the attention of the Economic Development Department and Tourism Squamish have been taken up by both the renovations at the Adventure Centre and looking at how that the building is managed going forward. So, but we will relook at that with our plans in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, Council? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. A few detailed questions for Mr. Morwood. I think I saw him here. The third Ave Pond flag gate replacement, that has been in the budget for a number of years. So I was surprised to see that the decision has been made that it's no longer needed. Just wondering if you can speak to that at this time.
Good afternoon, Jesse Morwood, Capital Projects Manager. Thank you for the question. Originally, it was identified through a dike inspection that was required. So it went in the budget for this year. And my recollection, what happened was we did a more detailed investigation what was going on and realized that it wasn't needed. So that's why the project's been canceled.
Okay, and then while I have you here, there's a few items under your portfolio that are looking for carry forward because the project design has taken longer. And one of the efforts that we've been doing is to pull our budgets forward so that we can have budgets in place for January so that we can get those RFPs out. Is that kind of trend that we're seeing just a challenge with the projects in terms of design, but we're still getting the design RFPs out, or is it just that we're putting in projects in too early without a fulsome design?
Sorry, the question is we're seeing a lot of carry forwards, and what's the reason why we're seeing those carry forwards in projects? Great question. I think it's probably project specific. From off the top of my head, there has been some different issues. We were kind of aggressive in where we thought we'd be with staffing and with projects. So there's some issues with hiring staff. We had some challenges with design consultants. They also took on more than they could actually deliver, and so there were some challenges there. So again, there's been a variety of reasons. There's been a variety of reasons that we're trying to address, I guess, and so moving forward, the intent is that any of those carry forward monies will be delivered next year.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you. I had one other question about the Dentville Park, which I'm just curious what the plan is going forward, and in particular around looping back with community. So that's one project that we have gone out and did some public engagement on, but it looks like it's being further delayed. So I'm just wondering if we go back to the folks who responded to the initial survey so that they know what the proposed timeline is going forward.
Through the chair, just clarifying, are we talking about Dentville Park or the North Yards?
Sorry, the No Name Road Park.
If we could come back to that question, the staff person is not here today, but I have a summary and I will just refer to that and come back maybe on the next question.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Do you have another question to fill that to buy Mr. Vilniskis sometime? I can go down the list. Councillor Greenland, did I have your hand earlier? No. I'm seeing no hands over here. Someone have an additional question? I will hazard one that's quite general. It's more about the format of this reporting. I wondered, earlier the questions around the event, tournament, camping, parking lot, community storage topic. It's a $5,000 item in this, and it's the smallest item in this report. I just wondered, does this format just mirror our budget process and tie right into that? So if these line items of that nature are in the budgeting process, the reporting reflects that as well, because I just find it interesting as we're looking at some of these items are up to $12 million, in the millions, and I just wondered how I appreciate having the clarity, but that one's really an outlier. So is that really the lowest line item that we had that carried forward, or just what's happening here, and how do we decide how we report?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So for your first question, yes, it aligns exactly to the special operating projects and the capital projects that are in our financial plan. Currently, we're working on moving some of the smaller items out as the community grows, as the budgets grow. Some of these sort of smaller budgets are really not worth highlighting necessarily. It's always been about special operating projects that have a start and a finish. They end up coming into the financial plan, but that's becoming quite onerous as we have larger budgets. So some of these things are legacy. They're slowly making their way out of the financial plan, and we will be establishing thresholds that when they actually meet a line item versus when they just get absorbed into someone's operations going forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vilnius, did I buy you enough time for the, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the initial public engagement was completed. Then it moved to a concept design. And the next step will be going back to the public with a concept design, getting final comments, and then finalizing the park design.
Okay, Council, I feel like this is your last sort of shot at questions if there are. Otherwise, we have the recommendation is to receive the report. Are you moving receipt of the report? Yep. Is there a seconder for that? Second by Councillor Anderson. So moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Anderson. Would you like to speak to it?
It's just great to see all the project managers here and to answer our, well, I guess what ultimately ended up being few questions instead of many, but great work is being done throughout the calendar year. So thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
I'll just first comment generally that I really appreciate this exercise, this opportunity. It's relatively new and we're getting used to it, but it's a great opportunity to get clear on a number of projects and areas. I wanted to just pass on the comment with respect to the marine impact study, and I'll quote here the description, not progressing in 2024 as funding for interrelated projects not realized. I've raised the issue of the marine impact study a few times recently. I just hope that one of those interrelated projects that we're waiting for is not dredging, because we don't need a dredging plan or dollars to get started on that study. In fact, it's the other way around. We need the impact study to help us acquire dredging support from senior government. Just to reiterate that comment on that one. I'm concerned that the projects that are relevant to our core and enabling sectors in our economic strategy, we're just not finding place for them in our work plan. And the other one was the tourism master plan. But we need to be mindful of the general picture of where we want to go and relate that to our strategic plan, which does identify core and enabling sectors and fostering increasing employment and activity in those sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. I agree with Councillor Anderson. This is a really helpful process, although we are still getting familiar with it. And I think one of the challenges is that we get most visibility into the queue or into the annual budget spend after we've done our budgeting. And so I don't think that there's a way to fix that, but I think that's one of the challenges and the questions that come up in terms of how much carry forward we're experiencing. It's not that we don't think staff are doing an excellent job in achieving as much as they can with the resources that they have. It's making sure that we don't overload it with the next year's budget and being really cognizant about how we're piling work on. And so this, to me, sitting in this chair is really helpful to get a really strong visual of how many projects are being carried forward and for what reason. And so thanks to staff for being here and answering the questions, and something to look forward to in the next year's budget. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate this report. And as my recollection is that in initial iterations, we didn't always see the amounts prorated to the current quarter we're at. And so being able to compare like third quarter this year versus last, I find helpful. I think there are some things, and it would be ideal if we have the Q4 version of this before we do our strategic plan review, because I would like to wrap my head around it, are the things we need to scale back or think about in our strategic plan, or just refine a bit, given how much it doesn't seem as just us that's having to carry forward things. Some development and so on that we're depending on isn't moving as fast as they thought as well. And so just that temperature check of where we're at, I think, is going to be really important. But happy to see this report. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm obviously speaking in support of the motion, but this report, I think, is sometimes the earlier ones, Q2, is harder to really see what's happening, I think, but this one, I think, has a lot of value, and particularly coming out of the budget process and thinking about the sort of the ambition of the budget. I think this is a really important piece of that work to understand how far, really what can get done. And I know that the pieces that are delayed, there's a story behind every one of how the original timeline was arrived at and why there needs to be a new timeline. And I know that varies widely, but it's a great sort of snapshot of where we're at, and I appreciate having that context. As I think around this table, we often get asked in the community exactly what's going on with a very specific thing. So these pieces are incredibly helpful to really understand all the moving pieces involved. So thank you so much for all the work throughout the year and for compiling this for us. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So next, we're moving on to the Siyich'em Eagle Viewing Area topic, and maybe we'll take just a quick 2-minute recess, let folks cycle out of the room, and we'll be back shortly. So 2-minute recess, please. Welcome back. I don't know if we went anywhere, but welcome back. We're on to item 3, sub 2, the Siyich'em Reserve Eagle Viewing Area topic. I'll turn over to our staff to run us through their presentation.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is David Rolston. I'm the Senior Manager of Infrastructure Planning with the District of Squamish, and I have with me Erica Ellis, a geoscientist and project manager from Kerwood Lydell Associates, who has managed this project on the consulting side of things. And we're here today to discuss ongoing dike planning work in the Siyich'em Reserve and Eagle Viewing Area. So our 2 main objectives for today's presentation are to provide an update on ongoing dike planning work in the Eagle Viewing and Siyich'em Reserve area, and to seek council support to repurpose grant funds in order to reevaluate shortlisted options that were identified in the Eagle Viewing area and Siyich'em Reserve Dike Master Plan. So some background and important context that influences discussions regarding dike upgrades in this area is that the Siyich'em Reserve was originally 68 acres as it was surveyed in 1881. That comprised 38 acres on the mainland and 30 acres of gravel bar and island area, which is now in an area that is occupied by the Squamish River. Since the reserve was originally dedicated and surveyed, the Squamish River has shifted from its former alignment, which is shown in blue on this slide, and it shifted to the east, which is currently where the 30-acre portion is identified on this slide. And so that river migration has resulted in a significant amount of erosion and loss of reserve land. In addition to that, the Squamish River Dike was constructed in or about 1968, and it did not protect the full extent of the original reserves. So based on those factors, the current reserve size is 9.8 acres, which is about 6.6 acres on the mainland and 3.2 acres on the west side of the river. And so with this background and context, it's just important to recognize that any diking solution in this area does require the consent and approval of Squamish Nation. So a brief timeline on work that has brought us to this point. In 2017, the district completed an integrated flood hazard management plan. It was a comprehensive plan with over 100 recommendations. And included within that is it identified significant deficiencies in the Squamish River Dike at the Eagle Viewing area and Siyich'em Reserve. And it recommended to complete a special study in order to determine the approach for upgrading the dike in the area. That was recommended because of some of the unique challenges of upgrading the dike in this area, including multiple different landowners, as well as significant infrastructure within or adjacent to the dike, including major drainage pump stations and government road. In 2020, the district and Squamish Nation partnered on a dike master plan, and that evaluated several different options to upgrade the dike in the area. 3 options were shortlisted, and district and Squamish Nation councils both endorsed realigning the dike from the south end of Siyich'em Reserve to Fisherman's Park. The plan also included recommendations to confirm the feasibility of that dike realignment. In 2021, the district and Squamish Nation initiated a pre-design study as recommended to confirm the feasibility of the dike realignment. That work was completed this year, and it confirmed that a dike realignment is no longer the preferred options, which is for reasons that I'll get into shortly. During the preparation of that pre-design study in 2022, the district applied for and received a $150,000 grant in order to complete a dike breach modeling study that would evaluate the impacts of realigning the dike on the impact it would have on flood levels within the Squamish River as well as within the dike protected floodplain. So now, based on the findings and recommendations of the pre-design study, we are seeking to amend the scope of the grants that we received for dike breach modeling to instead revisit shortlisted options from the dike master plan and select a new preferred option. So to provide a brief overview of the dike master plan that was completed in 2020, it identified, originally there were 8 options that were identified for upgrading the dike, and that was shortlisted down to 3 options. On the Siyich'em Reserve, that included a retaining wall, land raising on the reserve, or a new dike alignment, which is shown by option C on this slide. And within the Eagle Viewing area, so areas south of the Siyich'em Reserve, there was only a single option, which entailed a landside dike expansion and using retaining walls where necessary to avoid impacts to existing infrastructure, namely government road. That's not really the focus of today's presentation, so I won't go into any further details on that. So as recommended by the Dike Master Plan, the district and Squamish Nation councils endorsed realigning the Squamish River Dike. The key considerations to that were that a realignment would allow for Squamish Nation to potentially recapture historic reserve land. The dike realignment would also allow for abandoning 2 pump stations and 1 flood box, as well as avoiding dike upgrades in proximity to homes along Eagle Run, Maple Drive, and closer to Fisherman's Park. The cost estimate at that time, 2021, was $114 million, and that was to upgrade the dike from the south end of the Eagle Viewing area all the way up to Jimmy Judd Slough or Fisherman's Park. The drawbacks of this option that were identified at that time was that a dike realignment would partially disconnect floodplain area from the river, impacting both land and water habitat. And the majority of public feedback at that time also didn't support dike realignment due to impacts on the environment, recreation, as well as public access. So to advance the design and confirm the feasibility of dike realignment, the Dike Master Plan recommended geotechnical, hydrotechnical, and environmental investigation and analysis, which are identified in items 1 to 4 on this slide. And it also recommended a dike breach modeling study, again, to assess impacts that dike realignment would have on Squamish River levels. In 2021, the district and nation initiated the pre-design study to address items 1 to 4. Item 5 wasn't included because it was a significant scope of work that was considered to be standalone. In 2022, the district applied for and received a $150,000 grant under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund in order to complete that study. So a significant amount of work has been completed since 2021, and that pre-design study has now been finalized. The key outcomes of that are that the civil engineering feasibility has been confirmed. Conceptual dike design drawings have been prepared, and the cost estimate has been updated. So it's now $151 million, which includes $56 million allowance for engineering, habitat compensation, and contingency. The environmental impact assessment identified major permanent impacts to fish and land-based ecosystems. And so that would result in a significant amount of habitat compensation requirements. So significant, in fact, that there is only a single project that has been identified that would provide the compensation necessary. And that is called the Chicken Soup Slough rewatering. The Chicken Soup Slough is located in the upper Squamish Valley on Siyich'em Reserve. And it involves rewatering a slough with water from Pilchuck Creek in order to enhance fish habitat. That project has been identified as being very complex, and there's many uncertainties to it. It would be costly both to build and also to maintain, and it would also occupy a large footprint on the Siyich'em Reserve. So based on those findings, the Squamish Nation Rights and Title Advisory Board did not support dike realignment as a means to recapture lost reserve land.
Mm-hmm.
The key recommendations of the pre-design study are for—
How much is it?
Okay. To seek District and Squamish Nation Council support to revisit shortlisted options from the Dike Master Plan. And so that's the scope of the grant amendment request. And just to note, Squamish Nation staff intend to seek their council's endorsement to revisit shortlisted options from the Dike Master Plan in early 2025. The pre-design study also recommends to engage with senior levels of government to support selecting a new preferred alternative to dike realignment. And the objectives of revisiting the options are to address dike deficiencies while protecting and enhancing the environment, and also addressing Squamish Nation's land management objectives, including addressing previous loss of reserve land. Once the work is complete, District and Squamish Nation staff will return to our respective councils with recommendations for a new preferred strategy. So just to summarize the grant request, it's to repurpose funds originally intended for a dike breach modeling study, which that work is no longer relevant, and to revisit the two other shortlisted options from the Dike Master Plan, which are a retaining wall shown on the left here on the land side of the dike in order to allow for upgrading the dike without further encroachment into reserve land, or to raise the land on Siyich'em Reserve and essentially build that into the dike. And it's possible that there could be a hybrid solution between these two. The scope of that work will be to prepare updated concept design drawings and cost estimates for the new preferred option, and to advance into the design stage of that work. And so the recommendation, without going into the specific wording, is to repurpose the grant funds as discussed today. With that, I'll hand it back to the chair for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Councilor Anderson, go ahead.
Mr. Rolston, my question is a general one, and it concerns the opportunities list for alternate restoration habitat compensation initiatives. I've been involved as a volunteer at Squamish Street Keepers for about 15 years, and with these discussions and talking with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, my general perspective that it would be nice to have a clearer picture of opportunities, and we don't really. Part of the problem is that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans staff that are specifically focused on restoration aren't based here. They're based in the Fraser Valley, and the zone that they cover is quite large. And I know that your staff and our consultants have engagement with these folks, but I'll just throw out some illustrations of an issue. The riparian restoration project, which was approved in our budget, I think last year or 2 years ago, and it may be ongoing, I understand it's delayed because really they're just trying to find out, well, there's a number of issues with it. And one of them is how we prioritize and where the money should go. You may be familiar with some of that project as it overlaps with the stormwater management issues for the Mamquam floodplain. So there's that project is already ongoing, 90,000 allocated to it. And maybe we should learn from it in terms of where are we at in examining where restoration opportunities are and how to prioritize them. The second example I'll throw out is the Squamish. When the Squamish dike...
Councillor, I'm looking for a question.
I will
question.
come to a
If we
question.
can get there. Okay.
I have to really, I'm trying to illustrate this, is that there's a project long painted out and described in the Squamish for restoring a spawning channel that's never worked for us. It's rewatering. And the other project that the district's been involved in now for 25 years is the Upper Mamquam Land Channel and the Mamquam Reunion and also Squamish Reunion. So what might be next steps to, and maybe it's beyond your department or this project, to identify these potential opportunities and rank them as to priorities? Is there a need for some new kind of a discussion table to identify these? It looks to be a very important problem to identify the next step opportunity for a restoration habitat compensation. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. To date, the district has evaluated habitat compensation projects on a project-by-project basis. So I think it's accurate, your point that you're making, that there hasn't been a bigger picture evaluation of the various habitat compensation projects, sort of the inventory of projects that could potentially be completed. And there could potentially be value in completing a project like that. There has been discussions with Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Squamish Nation, Squamish River Watershed Society about completing a study of that nature. To my knowledge, that hasn't been completed to date, and it likely is a multi-jurisdictional exercise to look into something like that. So I think there's ongoing work, but nothing to date that is a comprehensive inventory. I will say we did, as you mentioned, we engaged with Squamish Nation and Department of Fisheries and Oceans as part of this project to identify habitat compensation projects to compensate for the environmental impacts that this dike upgrade would have. But again, that's been sort of completed on a project-specific basis and not on the bigger picture, holistic watershed type of level of analysis.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation and the update on this important file. I'll save my comments about where we're at until that time. I think my question is mostly around, we know that there is a brand new building at Siyich'em for their affordable housing, and they're in the midst of constructing another one for their healthcare center. And so with the proposed options that we would be looking into with the redirection of the grant funding. Does that put those new builds at risk? Or is that to be determined probably?
Through the chair, I think that the approach would be to identify a solution that is compatible with those existing or forthcoming buildings as opposed to impacting existing builds. And so that's why I mentioned that there would likely be or potential for a hybrid solution. So if land raising were something that were considered, yeah, there would likely need to be a retaining, at least local retaining walls to preserve those building footprints. If you have anything further to add to that.
You've said it very well.
Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. And then I am just curious if the province has a role or a seat at all in this conversation, just in terms of facilitating. It is multi-jurisdictional. We are the Diking Authority, but it's set to their standards. And so I'm just curious where the province sits in this conversation, if at all.
Through the chair, the plan would be to engage with the province in terms of their role as a diking regulator through revisiting shortlisted options and to ensure that we are selecting an option that is approvable from a regulatory perspective. And then this would also inform any future conversations with the province in terms of land management objectives.
Okay, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I'm just, it's not clear to me. I mean, obviously there's some unique aspects to this particular project, but in general, the sorts of things we need to think about are fairly common in many parts of Squamish. Has this given us second thoughts about the feasibility of diking in general or on a large scale? Or is this sort of, we kind of understood, yeah, there's been some cost escalation, but there's nothing really overly surprising here? Or are we really having to rethink like, oh, wow, maybe we just can't do diking?
Through the chair, at this point, we haven't expanded the scope. So we are, looking at this on a specific project basis. I think that we have certainly learned a lot through going through this process in terms of the costs of diking. And I think there's a recognition that this is a project of a scale that will require senior levels of government to fund and is not realistic or feasible for the district to fund a project of this scale. So that's one learning that we can take away from it. Generally, we do have our integrated flood hazard management plan, which is updated on a 10-year time cycle, where we would incorporate any learnings or new information that has that we've learned over the intervening 10 years and incorporate that into something like an integrated flood hazard management plan. That's the point where we would kind of take a step back and incorporate those learnings and figure out, do we need to adjust our strategy? But that we're scheduled to update our integrated flood hazard management plan beginning in 2027. So I think that information that we learn from this will be incorporated into a future integrated flood hazard management plan.
Any other questions, Council? I'll venture one of my own. I guess it's two pieces. I've heard a lot about engagement with the nation or working together with the nation. I know that in the early phases of this project, it really was a joint project. Would you still classify it that way? Just want to make sure that has that ethos continued throughout the project to date?
Through the chair, that's correct. The district and Squamish Nation partnered on preparation of the Dike Master Plan as well as the pre-design study. So we have been working very closely with the nation, and the intent is that we will continue to work very closely with the nation on this next scope of work and all the way through to completion of this project.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to hear that. If I remember the early phases of this correctly, the initial study area wasn't as big as all the way around Eagle Run Drive, Maple Crescent. The piece that the new alignment was meant to sort of replace, and I found that was a compelling reason to explore it amongst many others. So on the map, that was a red line, I believe, on the last map that we saw of it. But what's the plan for that area? I know that was like an introduced scope in a way to this, but now it's in my mind, it's become sort of entangled in that. And I just wonder how you aim to look at that particular piece, because there is a complexity there with well, many factors. But I'm just curious about how we aim to address that planning work.
Through the chair, I'll start and then possibly hand it to Ms. Ellis. So the original scope of the dike master plan was from the south end of the eagle viewing area to the north end of the Siyich'em Reserve. And you're correct that through that process, the dike realignment was introduced as an option, which then necessitated expanding the scope and the boundary of this project to where the dike realignment would meet back up with our existing dike alignment. So where the original scope was to end at the north end of the Siyich'em Reserve, it was then expanded to Fisherman's Park. So now with revisiting shortlisted options, the main focus area is going to be the eagle viewing area and the Siyich'em Reserve. And the assumption here is that we're going to be upgrading the dike on its existing alignment. Therefore, anything north of the Siyich'em Reserve will also follow along the existing dike alignment. I don't believe that is necessarily needs to be incorporated into the scope. It's sort of an independent, we will do what we need to do in that area, but I think the focus is going to be eagle viewing area up to the north end of the Siyich'em Reserve, and there will likely be a future design exercise to determine how we upgrade the dike north of there.
Okay, so for that makes sense to me. Just at a high level, where does that stretch sort of fall in the general prioritization that we've been seeing, which is usually based on a bunch of factors. So just for the folks that have been following this and sort of know what to expect there roughly for that planning process to be initiated, I guess.
Through the chair, the integrated flood hazard management plan lays out priorities. It's a priority, but it's not the highest priority. I think the higher priority projects at this point would be the eagle viewing area, as well as sea diking in the downtown. And that section of the Squamish River Dike would fall after those two pretty major projects.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Councillor French.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. I'm looking at one of the diagrams in the report that shows flow, and just downstream of Fry's Creek, there's a historical log jam. So the question from the mayor about scope and boundaries just had me wondering. There are many in the community who feel if that historical log jam was removed, a significant amount of water volume would reroute on the original course. With what's happened with determining that the original course of action is not the best way to go, was any consideration given to looking further at that to try and divert some of the water volume out of this pressure point at Siyich'em?
Through the chair, that was evaluated, and essentially during a flood condition, that channel would be activated regardless of whether the logjam was removed. And so removing the logjam would impact more on lower flow conditions, and it doesn't actually influence what the dike preferred dike upgrade option would be in the eagle viewing and Siyich'em Reserve area. So it has been evaluated and considered, but it's been determined to essentially be an independent issue. And I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that on the technical side of things.
I guess just to reiterate that it absolutely was explored, because it is, as you say, an option that is of interest to people. Not only does it not have necessarily the flood stage impacts, it is interpreted by, I think, regulatory agencies, environmental regulatory agencies, as being a potential problem from an environmental impact point of view as well. So it really does have, and as well as like potentially an ongoing operation and maintenance challenge to keep that location free of logjam. So it has a number of challenges in addition to not necessarily having the flood protection benefits that would make it more compelling.
Thanks, Mayor. I was expecting to hear, no, that wasn't looked at. So it's great information. Thank you.
Thank you. There's some diagrams somewhere, I think, from the initial project as well around this, if I remember correctly. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure I understand rehabilitation offsetting properly. So I take it that we can't just go and rehabilitate on someone's private property. But is there an area of a river that's considered like DFO sort of controlled or within a riparian area where we do have the sort of rights to rehabilitate sort of regardless of who owns the parcels? And so if we had a long enough section of river, we could rehabilitate that sort of without worrying about who the landowner is, or we really have to look for parcels that we control somehow if we want to do rehabilitation?
Do you want to start? And I can, if
I think as a through the chair, as a general statement, you're correct that the district would need to have the ability to complete upgrade works. Much of natural river corridors is provincial land, and so I think generally, as a proponent, we would work with the province to propose and secure approvals to complete that work within provincial land. If a habitat compensation project is on private or First Nations land, then agreements would need to be reached with whoever the applicable party is. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question, or if you would have anything to add to that.
You just said it more eloquently. I was just going to say land tenure really does matter. There's not an easy way through this where you don't end up considering land tenure as one of the first pieces.
So, and sorry, Ed, the one thing that you said, Mr. Ralston, piqued my interest of the, putting words in your mouth maybe, but that the river corridor is generally provincially owned or controlled. Like, is there not a long enough stretch of river that we could sort of enhance to do offsetting, or it would just be so long? That's why we have to look at the Chicken Soup Slough, which then you're getting out of the river bed area and you're into the private or reserve land. And that's why that's challenging. Like, you just can't go the length of a river and improve the river, so to speak.
Through the chair, that's my understanding. We did complete a thorough evaluation of potential habitat compensation options, and that was not identified as a potential option that would meet the habitat compensation needs.
Okay, any other questions? We do have a staff recommendation before us. Moving the staff recommendation, Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor French. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, just briefly, as I said earlier, thanks for the update and for all the work on this. I do think it was really important that we did do the discovery work on that first option for a number of reasons. Not only did it achieve the desired flood level, but it was definitely, this is a joint project with the Squamish Nation and aim to achieve some of our goals around reconciliation and protecting Siyich'em Reserve, if not potentially expanding it. And so I think it was in all of our interest to do as much work to try and make that feasible. And I think it's unfortunate that it's not. But it's a good reality check. It's important that we did that work and appreciate the update. And now I think it's also really important that we utilize that grant funding to the maximum capacity. So appreciate you coming back and giving us this update. And hopefully that the funder is okay with the change in direction. I think it makes good sense. So hopefully they're supportive of that and look forward to hearing from our counterparts at Squamish Nation Council as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor French, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I'm very happy with the direction that we look to be going here. I was involved in some early committee work in my first term that ultimately led to the recommendation that we now look to be moving away from. And well, at the time, I felt that that was the best solution. It was a difficult solution because of the environmental impacts, the salmon impacts, and just the expense. Massive project. that apparently became even more massive with the compensation that was being considered. So all of that considered, I'm happy that we've concluded this isn't the best way to go. And still, though, committed to reconciliation with the Squamish Nation, because that's a very important part of what this project is aiming to achieve. So, Mayor, I'm definitely in favor of the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. The opportunities list and its challenges is an important theme here, and it's well presented. The challenges we have to address the core issues presented in this at this time. I'd just like to again emphasize it would be a wonderful idea to do some further work with other agencies and organizations to be better prepared. And I'd like to emphasize that the Squamish River Watershed Society is only one organization in the local landscape of organizations. The Streamkeepers and Squamish Environment Societies have other areas of geographic areas of interest, contact networks, all working together and overlapping, but they are part of that community that could be of assistance. The other point I'll make and is concerning place names used in this report. It occurs to me that it is in reports such as this that we use and even produce place names. And an example is the Jimmy Judd Slough term. That only came about and became popularized through reports like this. And I would like to suggest that this needs some attention. In about 100 years ago, or up to then, that slough was called the Waywickham Slough. And it was a branch of the river. In fact, the river, as you know, Mr. Rolston used to be a part of that picture, and it's changed over time. 1908, there was a change in course of river. Another example is what is called here the Harris Slough. It's spelled wrong. It's spelled the Scottish way, where Mr. Harris was German. But the other problem is that that's the Cowtain Slough. It goes right through their village. And if we were to ask anyone living at that village today, they would call it the Cowtain Slough. Given the importance we have in working together with the Squamish Nation, I suggest, and it's not a suggestion for the engineering department, but for all of us, that we should give this attention. But it is in connection with these reports that we use and become familiar with place names, and there's some work to be done to restore original or better place names, considering the relationship we aspire to have with the local Squamish Nation community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. It's a sobering report. I appreciate that we're continuing to work hand in hand with Squamish Nation on finding solutions. But when I put this in the context of the debris flow barrier and the relative costs and the fact that it took a private developer to provide the funding and accepting a lot of development to protect the whole community and the nation. And then when I think about the federal and provincial responses to Abbotsford after the atmospheric river and some of the other flooding we've seen, I think our review of the flood hazard management plan is going to be really critical, because when we start to see these numbers and think about realistically, it's probably going to be on us if these things are going to get done. I'm not really sure what the solution is. So certainly giving me a lot to think about, and we're going to have to probably make some hard decisions as a community going forward. Always like a challenge and look forward to that work. But hopefully we'll find some answers in this next piece. But I think we'll have a fair bit more work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for all the hard work. Thanks for the report. It is, the comments that you're hearing around the table, I'll just echo them. It is a sobering report. It is a lot of information, really high costs, and just a ever-present reminder of the geohazards that we deal with and living in this community. And I also just wanted to, I'm happy to support the staff recommendations. And I also just want to echo the comments of Councillor Anderson about place names. I think that's an important, step that we all need to make, is just recognizing the original names of some of these places. So anyways, thanks a lot for the work.
Thank you. Speaking in support of the motion, I guess I really had high hopes, as I know that the whole project team did, and as well as the other folks around this table, around addressing the historical issues at Siyich'em Reserve. And thank you for including that slide explicitly in your presentation today. I think that illustrates the weight that the team is giving this whole project. So I am disappointed that that's not something that we can address in this way. But I'm happy to see that, and I have the full confidence that it was explored to the furthest extent possible with the constraints that of the day. I do think that the context has changed. Earlier, we had some questions around things are ever evolving, and in the world, and Siyich'em Reserve is no different. Things have changed there since that initial assessment. And I think it's really important that highlights the importance of this work to try to align these things as best we can with with what is happening, Siyich'em, and what whatever the next plans are, so that this work can happen and the community can be protected to an adequate amount. I do think that that next, it's hard. We always want to look at things holistically, and I know that this is something that we do when we step back to a diking master plan, and council does. We try to stay at the highest level possible. I do think that future phase is upstream piece that along Eagle Run Drive, Maple Crescent is all the way to Fisherman's Park is going to be incredibly complex, and we know that it's going to have a tremendous expense. And I just wonder how, if those things could be linked better, if there is opportunity here somewhere left on the table to make lives easier for ourselves as we go about doing this work in that broader context. But I'm sure that as planning advances here, we can start grappling with that piece. But if there's any economies of scale, we talked about pump house relocations, like all these things, like how do we, it's just, I'm having a hard time letting go of that initial concept. And maybe there's something that's between, that's maybe there's a hybrid approach that may end up happening, but I'm not going to speculate too much. That's exactly what this work is set to answer, questions adjacent to this. So I look forward to that and future discussions. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, Council, I'm looking for a motion to close, please. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Greenlaw, second by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Motion carries. And we'll recess now for 15 minutes, and we'll rejoin in the closed. So you'll need to close link.